Welcome to MetaPod, the podcast where we discuss operational execs and organizations that make and move stuff, and our common headaches, digital transformation, the forever labor shortage, and doing more with less. And now, the host of MetaPod, Ron Crabtree.
Okay, it's Ron Crabtree back here, your host of MetaPod, and we've got a pretty darn interesting topic here around automation of procurement. And I'll have him introduce himself in a moment, but we have one of the world's leading experts in how you can leverage artificial intelligence, gaming theory, advanced technologies, and automation of procurement sourcing, vendor selection, negotiations, stuff like that. Amazing stuff. But that's what this is going to be all about, right? So this podcast will be for you if you've got an organization with significant spend. You might be an executive that doesn't know a whole lot about purchasing, or IT for that matter, and that's good because Edmund's going to help us understand all of that. And we'll start with the diagnostic. The average organization has a significant amount of spend. What would be the three key diagnostics? What would be the things that Edmund would suggest you should walk down the hall, talk to purchasing, and understand how we're doing today? Can they answer these questions or not? If they can't even answer the questions, that's a red flag. And what evidence can they provide that we are well-positioned or not in each of these three key areas of diagnostics? After we get through that and get grounded, then we'll flip and we'll talk about, great, let's assume the audience has as a problem. What do you do? What are the actions that organizations should take to go address those things? So with that, Edmund, tell us a little bit about you and the Kestra.
Well, thanks, Ron. Great to be here, and thanks for having me. I love talking about, the future of procurement, the future of the supply chain profession, where not just technology is taking us, but where the process and people of the profession are going. A little bit of background. So I worked as a procurement analyst, strategic sourcing advisor, and negotiation designer, really just helping large companies understand the process they go through with suppliers to come to an agreement around price, service levels, and all of the other stuff that great strategic supply and purchasing and procurement managers are able to deliver to their internal stakeholders in the business. And through doing that work, I have some training in data science, and I'm very interested in the role that artificial intelligence is playing in really changing not just the IT side of things, but actually enabling fundamentally new processes. And that's where some of the game theory and behavioral science comes in. When we started our Kestra, it was really a kind of simple premise. Can we enable organizations a better way to collect and compare quotes from their suppliers at scale and use data to decide if they're getting a good deal? And really just kind of as simple as that. Since then, we've put data to work on a number of different areas that procurement and supply chain teams work on. And today, our Kestra is the leading predictive procurement orchestration solution. We're known for simulating procurement before it happens and giving people an idea of what they can expect and what they should ask for from their suppliers. That's just a little bit about us. We're a global venture-backed company, and we focus on large enterprise manufacturing. So companies that typically have multiple plant locations, geographically distributed, a large product portfolio, and need to regularly procure in a timely manner materials, packaging, logistics, spare parts, and so on. Everything that a large enterprise manufacturing organization needs to function at peak performance.
Awesome. That was really good. And I don't want our smaller organizations that will be listening in, or consultants working with smaller size organizations. This is not a downer. What Edmund's going to cover with us is kind of the state of the art, and almost all of this can scale down to smaller spend applications, albeit you may not be using super powerful software, but you will want to go through the diagnosis, right? You will want to understand what the true opportunity is and why those are important, so that you can be well equipped to cope with all the demands that are coming at us to digitize, because of the three things that are going to kill us is fail, somehow get on the bandwagon properly, and digitize, no matter what size your organization be. So with that, let's pivot. Edmund, for just generally speaking, what would be the top three areas? If I'm an executive, say working in C-suite, don't know a whole lot about purchasing and IT, Now I've got to walk down to the hall and talk to those guys. What would be the 3 areas that we should ask questions about to diagnose if we have significant opportunity or a threat that we need to address? What would those 3 things be, and help us understand what all that means?
Yeah, absolutely, Ron. I think that I'm just going to hit the 3 real quick so you can kind of hear them, and then I'll tie them together a little bit because there is a deeper story. So I think for an executive talking to purchasing, procurement, supply chain, talk about what is the total spend, right? And that will give some idea of how much money procurement is managing through the processes that they govern. And this could be directly centralized procurement, which means the procurement team, have direct control to approve, expedite, potentially redirect in some cases if you have a good process in place. Or it could be decentralized procurement, where procurement is supervising or enabling the purchase of goods and services by the plant managers, the people in the kind of individual business units or departments, and all of that can be part of that total spend number. But understanding what procurement's role in the spend is also really, really important.
Yeah, I'd like you to ask you to elaborate for just a second around controllable spend, because organizations sometimes get caught up in their customers have actually mandated they use certain suppliers, right? If they're like contract manufacturers, for example, may have little control over the sourcing. So maybe you can elaborate a bit on I'll call it the controllable versus less so, and what the difference between those might be.
Yeah, it's a great question. In procurement, there's actually a term of art, which is addressable spend. And so addressable spend is like a great way to kind of think about that. When we talk about total spend, we're usually kind of drop the word, but it's total addressable spend is what we're really talking about. I will say I've worked with a lot of contract manufacturers, and just because your company or your customers mandate using a specific supplier doesn't necessarily make that spend not addressable. It might constrain the ways that you can address it. And of course, it might prevent you from changing suppliers, but there are all kinds of ways to address spend, even with extraordinary constraints on optionality. And that's something that we've actually seen a lot with Orchestro and throughout the Orchestro customer base. The second thing I would say is, if we think about what's not addressable spend, by the way, like taxes are a great example, right? Procurement is not really in a position to address taxes. Typically like a lot of payroll is, that's under HR. That's not really procurement's purview. So there is stuff that companies spend money on that's not addressable kind of structurally. But from a finance standpoint, from the CFO position, that's really where procurement fits in. If you're giving money to a supplier or a third party, and it's not the government, generally we would say that it could qualify as addressable. The last thing I'll just say on this topic is one question. If you're an executive walking down the hall, you want to ask, your purchasing team, your procurement team, a question is you can say, hey, for our addressable spend, what's the Pareto of our supplier base? And that generally means like, what's the 80-20? So a lot of manufacturing companies will have around, 70+%. Sometimes it's 80 or even above 90% of their spend with a very small number of suppliers. And whether your Pareto is very high or very low, knowing that and having insight into that can tell you a lot about what the opportunity for cost reduction is. So a lot of companies are looking at cost reduction very seriously. Procurement and purchasing is a fantastic place to look at that. And it doesn't always have to mean switching suppliers. It doesn't always have to mean buying a lower quality item or a lower service level from your suppliers. There are often ways to get cost reduction, and in some cases that involve increasing the quality or increasing the performance at the same time.
Thank you, because I wanted to ask you what your experience has been. I mean, one-dimensional efforts, right? All I want to do is drive costs. Well, what happens to delivery lead times? What happens to reliability and quality? What happens to the responsiveness of that supplier when there is a problem? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm guessing, you've got to put some weight on those things too.
Absolutely. And I would say that that's actually a great myth about procurement, in part because of how automotive purchasing worked in the 90s, where people would come in and hammer suppliers, and that was a very common practice. And I think, what are you hammering them on price, right? So I think that, procurement has gone through an evolution within the broader supply chain function. And today, more than ever, especially after COVID and the supply chain crisis, there's a great and ever-present awareness that outcomes are holistic. Procurements are value creators and really value enablers for their stakeholders, with the stakeholders in most organizations being that ultimate decision maker. So the business is going to say, hey, we like the deal or we don't like the deal. And if procurement goes and says, oh, well, we got this great cost down outcome, but the supplier sucks and they're late all the time and there's quality issues, that's not a good outcome for the business. And I think everyone's aware of that now. What we focus on is how can you maximize the value of procurement's involvement in a process? And that's measured on a lot of different dimensions. And so, yes, you want to look at total spend. You want to look at your Pareto. But that's a great way to begin the conversation about what are our dimensions of value that we want to track consistently quarter over quarter and see ideally those improve together. So you're not seeing trade-offs. If you see costs go down and other metrics suffer, that indicates there is a trade-off, and trade-offs generally, I would say, for purchasing and procurement are undesirable because they pit procurement as kind of the bad guy versus other functions in the business. And you don't want procurement in your organization to have a negative reputation because it makes creating cost reductions that are meaningful and important much more difficult.
All right, cool. So what would be the next area generically we'd want to diagnose?
I would say look at how big your procurement and purchasing team is and really look at the division between what we would call kind of transactional procurement, which is like cutting purchase orders, in some cases, like running a process through if you have an ERP system or if you have another system, and then strategic procurement. How many people do you have that are looking at the market, that are spotting opportunities when prices change to get better deals with your suppliers, that are going and spending time in your suppliers' plant sites, that are visiting with them, building relationships, and then understanding the data and kind of the landscape of the categories in which they're procuring in at a deep level. So really building subject matter expertise. If they're a raw materials procurement person, like how much time did they get to spend out of their week just learning about raw material markets that are going to affect their suppliers' pricing?
Yeah, if you counted any benchmarks there for what you consider to be leaders in terms of what percentage of the procurement workforce is working on the future versus just the transactional, keeping the doors open, is there a healthy balance there, a percentage maybe?
I would say that one of the reasons there isn't a great benchmark now is that organizations are going through transformations, and we're in a season of procurement transformation across industry. And so what companies are doing is going from typically larger teams that have a lot of, call them buyer roles as part of the org structure, that are doing more transactional procurement. And what they're doing is they're moving towards category management, and they're moving towards strategic procurement. So having dedicated center of excellences around strategic sourcing and category management, and then like analytics and reporting. And in some cases, there are dedicated technology teams within the procurement function, so the procurement can own and also be held accountable for transformation activities associated with adopting new technology and associated with making sure that the data around different functional workflows is clean, consistent, accurate, reliable, and so on.
All right, so the degree to which those questions even get answered is a red flag. And people say, "What are you talking about, boss?" Now you got a big task in front of you, or the answers you're getting are a little too vague, or they're not able to give you some data or anything to back it up. That suggests that there's probably a big opportunity there.
I would say so. And I would also say that most procurement professionals I know, they're crunched on time. and they have a lot of fires to put out. There are new fires that get lit every day, every week. We see supply chain is in the news quite frequently. You have a shipment that's stuck on a ship in a port that closes suddenly, unexpectedly, or if there's a geopolitical event that causes freight to get rerouted. This is something that procurement, purchasing, and supply chain teams are really on the front lines of. And so the more capacity and bandwidth they can have to focus on seeing around corners, the more value they can create for the organization. And that's really where technology comes in as well. It's not about displacing the value that these teams are offering to their organizations. It's about getting them out of the weeds, and especially out of some of these transactional workflows. That's where automation really comes in. It allows these teams to recruit top talent and to deliver these transformations that we all know are the future of this profession. But people struggle because of legacy technology, data in disparate systems, low data quality. And so I talk about you want to have these numbers. You at least want to be able to ask them. But I think in a lot of companies, even big companies with very sophisticated teams, they're still on a journey to deliver a lot of these metrics and the road to best in class, or at least the road to better in class.
And that's a perfect segue then to this other diagnostic point here, the cycle time it takes for procurement activities to run. What do you mean by that? And what should we be looking for?
Before we get to cycle time, I just want to summarize the first three points.
Please do.
I said I would summarize, and then we went into it. And so total spend, size of the team, and then I do think, even though this is not the end all and be all, I think doing a little bit of a look at purchase price variance is helpful. And the reason for that is that what you'll see frequently in big companies, and by the way, this scales down. I mean, everyone does this. It actually scales down to the individual, right? You buy, over the course of a month, 12 sandwiches. Well, these sandwiches all cost different amounts of money, right? So you're saying, okay, if I wanted to optimize for value, I would probably have my favorite sandwich at the best price, right? And if you look at companies manufacturing what you're buying spare parts, you might see the exact same part number that has wildly different prices. And this is actually very logical if you think, oh, well, some of these parts were ordered in a rush, so there's a rush charge. Oh, some of these were bought in larger order quantities, so there's a volume-based discount baked into the order that the supplier is giving us. Fantastic. The question, the reason this is a useful exercise in opportunity assessment is you can say, what would it look like if I got all of my parts at the best price that I'm currently getting? Now, by the way, that's not, generally speaking, possible. So let's just change the question and say, what if it was only 20% more that I got my best price, right? For big companies, that's a significant amount of money. And that goes right to the bottom line, which means, and you can do this analysis called sales equivalency cost of savings or value of savings. If you make $1 and your profit margin is 10%, then you're getting 10 cents of that dollar. But if you save $1, that full dollar is going to your bottom line. And so savings is often actually more valuable than sales, because you have the cost that comes out of the sales that's, subtracted for revenue, and that's where you get profit. And so, procurement can deliver this really significant, meaningful financial benefit if it's done correctly and with purpose and intention, and with I think enthusiasm. I'm a big believer in procurement and purchasing with enthusiasm, but it has to be done also with data.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. You want to pivot now to the cycle time thing? I'm interested in learning about this.
Yeah. So in terms of, you said that the diagnostic, these are levers, right? So when we have best in class procurement organizations, we see the ability to shrink cycle time and the ability to actually control cycle time, to have more control over how long it takes to award business, to get a contract done, to get a deal done on the procurement side of the table, and just to make approvals happen for a PO. You also see data quality go up, so you have more faith and consistency in the numbers that you're seeing associated with procurement and purchasing. And you can put data to work, your own data to work, deciding whether or not you're getting a good deal. Because at the end of the day, you can buy benchmarks, consulting groups will sell you benchmarks. You can create benchmarks on your own. You can build should cost models. There are all kinds. You can do linear regressions over your previous purchase price. But at the end of the day, if you can see across all of the different offers or quotes that you're getting from your suppliers and compare what some of those offers are against new offers, that's a really useful way to know if, things are getting worse or better, you're getting a better deal than you got before. And if procurement is spending time on something, you want that to show up in numbers. It doesn't all have to be price, but it could be supplier performance. It could be better service levels. And we just think that that's super exciting.
Okay. So for our novice audience who, rattled off like 4 or 5 different components that would make up total cycle time, like you talked about the quoting response, you talked about, onboarding a new supplier response, what would be like 3 or 4 core cycle time elements that we probably should be looking at? And are there any benchmarks for that?
So there absolutely are benchmarks. I'd say they vary pretty widely based on the size of the team and the industry. And is it a global company? Is it, geographically concentrated? And so I would say, yes, there are benchmarks, but, just take them with a grain of salt, depending on what industry you're in and the complexity of the industry. I would say if we look at where cycle time was, say 5 years ago, right? I'm talking like pre-COVID. A lot of big companies would take, 4 to 6 months to do an RFP, complex RFP. And we're talking like a multi-million-dollar RFP. This could be for, maintenance, repair, and operations, formulary catalogs, things that they're using to buy on a very regular basis to run their plants and run their equipment and run production actually as well on the direct material side. I think the expectation with all operational cycles has been that they be dramatically shrunk. And so I think best in class today for executing an RFP of that same identical size is now a matter of weeks, right? And so you're going from 6 months to 6 weeks. That's a dramatic shrinking of the cycle time, and that really has become a new expectation. And what's interesting is that the shorter the cycle time, the more priority you're getting from the supplier base, because the sales team is saying, oh, I can get a deal done in a quick amount of time. I'm going to put my energy into focusing on that. And during COVID and the supply chain crisis, one of the things we saw is a drive, and you actually see this in the consulting and analyst world among procurement, purchasing, and supply chain teams to be a customer of choice, right? So now we're competing for our suppliers' attention, their priority and allocation, and all of these things. That's one of the reasons that people spend time building supplier relationships. That's one of the business reasons to spend time on site visits and relationship building with the key strategic suppliers, and to talk about innovation, to do joint business planning or integrated business planning together, to in some cases expose demand over a longer time horizon. Say, here's the demand that's coming up. How can you help us? How can we work together to get ahead of this demand? And so that, I think, all goes to the point of, I'll give you one other one, which is we talked with a customer that's a very high-tech company, and they did an analysis of how long it took a purchase request to get turned into an approved purchase order sent to the supplier. It was over 40 days. So if you think about what can be a dependency for that, what that encourages, actually, the behavior that encourages is for stakeholders to insist on no changes, right? Because they know how long it takes to get approved. And so they come in and go, yeah, here's the purchase request. We already talked to the supplier. Here's their quote, no changes, approve it as quickly as possible, because we know it's going to take 40 days. So we don't want you to go and get more quotes. We don't want you to try and improve the outcome we've delivered because of this inflexible cycle time. And so what procurement teams now want to do, many procurement teams, they want to get involved earlier in the process. And I think the exchange they're making with stakeholders is to say, we want you to bring us into more deals, and we want to be involved before Ideally, we want to be involved in supplier selection. We want to help negotiate. We're negotiation experts. We can lend a hand. And in return, we're going to deliver faster cycles.
All right, cool. You want to move on to the third diagnostic now?
So I think those three are really, from the diagnostic standpoint, cycle time, data quality, and just putting that data to work. That's really...
Yeah, that's what we'll talk more about, data quality, as we get into the advice part of this, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Data quality, if you don't have confidence, at least to some degree, in the underlying data, then measuring all this stuff just becomes challenging, right? So having a KPI around data quality can be a way to work on improving that over time and to identify the sources at attribution for bad data. So we did a 3-part series in Forbes specifically about data quality and purchasing. And we looked at all of the different types of errors that crop up in purchasing data.
So you said it was published in Forbes. How will people find that?
Oh, just if you Google my name and the devil's in the details.
Ooh, I love it.
That's what we called the series, because it really is in the weeds, right? Full disclosure, if you find this stuff, kind of unreadably boring, like steer clear. But there's real money and tangible business value in improving, the data quality in procurement and purchasing. And so we wanted to do a series where we broke it down into kind of digestible chunks, playbooks, bullet points that make it really easy to consume.
Yeah. So as the executive walking down the hall, show me how we're measuring data quality. If they can't answer the question, okay, we've got a gap, obviously. And then if we do measure it, how good is it? And is that impeding us and in the way? And is that an area of opportunity or a significant gap? So I think that's pretty straightforward. And people want to know a lot more can check out those Forbes articles. So if it's okay with you, I'd like to pivot now. Okay, you've given us things we really should look at, and why we're looking at them, and how we might determine if there's a gap. Let's pretend that our audience say, yep, we got to deal with that. Can you share some sage advice about, okay, we got the problem, now what do you do?
Well, I think, for a lot of organizations, in many cases, the challenge of procurement and purchasing seems monumentally complex. And then where do you start, right? Like, we have, a team of people that are experts that have done in many cases, the job for decades, and they've done it in a certain way that oftentimes is different than what the technology now enables. And so you have, on the one hand, a desire to keep your domain experts happy and satisfied and not rock the boat too much, because the car is driving down the road at 100 miles an hour. You don't have time to stop the car, get out, and put a new engine in. You have to keep things moving. But at the same time, the change, is coming, and it's coming faster than ever. So how do we eat the elephant one bite at a time and make change part of the culture of procurement and purchasing? And how do we deliver on some of the transformative opportunities, especially, and I would say certainly not just around cost. Like, if cost reduction is the limit of your imagination for what procurement can do for your business, I would encourage you. So one of my mentors who I look up to greatly and get a lot of great perspective from is a gentleman named Len DeCandia. And Len was Chief Procurement Officer of Johnson & Johnson recently. He's just now retired. He's a 4-time CPO, and he's done 4 large procurement transformations in big companies. At J&J, he was managing $40 billion in addressable spend, just to give you an idea. And it was, through COVID, so there was Operation Warp Speed, and procurement was involved in the development of the vaccine, and so on and so forth. A lot of really interesting procurement and purchasing challenges from the manufacturing side. So Len and I sat down over the past 6 months, and we wrote a guide to procurement transformation based largely on interviews with his experience at J&J. And it's available on our website, orchestra.com. If you're interested in creating transformation in your purchasing, procurement, and supply chain organizations. Download it, check it out. It's got very specific practical tips for how you can move fast, but bring your stakeholders in the business along with you, how you can introduce tangible business impact through technology without ruffling too many feathers or creating too much controversy.
Exactly. Wow. So that's just a treasure trove of, additional details that, you can dive into for the go-do. So that's incredibly helpful. With respect to those three things we talked about, were there any other beyond that, right? Reading up on all that, learning all that, what else might you suggest is practical go-dos for executives that recognize we have a gap we need to close? What other advice might you offer?
Well, so in terms of getting started, I think, with transformation, alignment, especially executive alignment, is always, in my opinion, a much bigger challenge than people really give it credit for. And so if you solve that problem, you can solve a lot of other problems with a team that's rowing in the same direction, unified and has a sense of purpose. And so my, kind of call to action or suggestions around go-dos, if you're an executive and you want to challenge your purchasing team or your procurement organization holistically, is to say, let's pick, 1 to 5 projects that historically have taken, more than 3 months, and let's do all of them in, call it 6 weeks or less. And just the kind of lived experience of doing something in order of magnitude faster, I think creates a ton of momentum, enthusiasm, and it creates bandwidth for change. And so one thing that we've been having a lot of fun with and with our Orchestra customers is, let's say your annual number, right? You want to have, improve OE by this amount, and you want to have cost reduction by this amount, and you want to maybe do some supplier consolidation, shrink the supplier base a little bit. What would it look like to do the entire year in 90 days? Because it's possible, right? Like, for a lot of organizations, you're making that plan of what we're going to get done in a year with the understanding of what legacy technology can do and how much time, and say like, hey, by the way, if you deliver the year in 90 days, here's the value of that accelerated impact to the business, right? If every month you delay saving $1 million is $80K just out of your pocket that you can never get back. So the speed of saving cycles is really important. And so set a goal, say, hey, if we deliver this in 90 days, like we're giving everyone bonuses, right? Like procurement and purchasing folks, in a lot of organizations are not compensated relative to their impact. They're compensated in a transactional or hourly manner. And so create some excitement, create some recognition for that impact, and then challenge the team to deliver a big win radically faster. And so I think that this, moment that people sort of get that energy and excitement, and they set up their war room to begin thinking through this transformational cycle, they'll begin thinking about technology, right? They'll be thinking about, okay, how are we going to tweak our roles a little bit to all take on maybe some more strategic actions that we were leaving by the wayside when we had more fires to fight. Maybe we're going to have these 2 people fight the fires, and the rest of us are going to work on delivering the year in 90 days. So,
Exactly.
These are all ways to be.
Yeah. I'd like to interrupt there with a question. I'm going to guess, based on what you said very early in the podcast, around how much of our time we're spending firefighting, right? Doing transactional things and trying to understand what percentage of all of our energy is being diverted. As a practical matter, as you begin to work with a company, you find out, 70% of all the time being worked is just firefighting. And we're going to need that to be flipped so they can spend 70% of their time deploying what needs to be done. How do you solve that problem? Do you ever, work through solving that kind of challenge? What would be your advice there if you've got a bandwidth problem?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that at the end of the day, there's only, 3 ways to deal with having too much reactive firefighting work. And it's to hire more people. It's to decide that some fires don't need to be fought, or automation, right? Those are the three ways that you can deal with this kind of persistent challenge of always having, playing whack-a-mole with the crisis of the week. And so some organizations say, you know what, great, let's hire more people. And actually, a lot of organizations have thought in that way. And today, we have a huge number of open roles in procurement and purchasing. And the next generation of talent comes in to interview for these roles, and they go, you're using this system, and I have to rekey this data, and it takes me this long to generate this report, and I could go work at, another company or in a different function and push a button and have, all of my numbers and some sense of how accurate they are just served up to me. Like maybe working at one of the most stressful, challenging, like you have to have great soft skills and relationship building. You have to have analytic mentality. You have to be very hard-nosed when it comes to saying no to people and saying no politely. If they, you need to tell someone, hey, you don't have that money to spend, sorry. And so I think it's, people are seeing this as a recruiting challenge. I just did a piece this week in the Industry Today that is around the talent gap in procurement and purchasing for this exact reason, right? Second is you could decide there are some fires that you just don't want to fight anymore. You're happy to let them burn, or you're comfortable with a certain amount of error. I think that a lot of companies are ostriching their way through this transformational period, putting their head in the sand and saying, if we can't see it, it's not worth fixing, or it's not broken enough to kill us. So we don't care if it hurts us. And quite frankly, those companies have major risk, operational risk, and I would say even business continuity risk in some of their supply chains. And it'll only take like one more crisis, like another war, or another ship getting stuck in a canal somewhere, to expose that risk, because lack of visibility and ostriching is not, hope is not a strategy. So I think and there are a lot of companies, I think, that aren't really candid about the extent to which that is their strategy. And then automation, right? We're here to talk about automation, technology. And, I'm a big believer in automation. I think, we're in San Francisco where I live, we have these, cars you can get in that they don't have a driver, right? And my father was here. I got the pleasure of riding in a car. It was his first experience riding in a car with no driver. Now, this technology is pretty new, but I will tell you, it absolutely blows your mind when you think about how quickly this technology around instant data analysis and directed action for autonomy, how quickly this technology is moving, how fast it's getting. And what I would say is, if we can imagine a car that can drive itself, then why can't we imagine a purchase order that approves itself if it meets certain criteria? Why can't we imagine a quoting cycle that runs with either much less or more targeted human involvement? And so the metric that I'll kind of end with as maybe a motivation or inspiration is, let's look at how much spend each procurement person is managing. And there is an ISM benchmark for this, because you asked about benchmarks a few times earlier, right? The average category manager is driving right around $45 million in terms of the addressable spend that they are personally managing, and they're delivering around $2 million of business value on that 45 million over the course of a year, right? And what's interesting is that some organizations will have category managers that manage themselves, by themselves, or with a very small team, billions of dollars of the company's spend, and are driving significantly, orders of magnitude more value. And so the question that executives should be asking themselves is, which bucket do you want to be in? Do you want to have a procurement and purchasing organization that is best in class and is pushing the envelope of kind of art of the possible? And if you want that, then automation and having a plan, having a ready, aim, fire, not a ready, fire, aim, is the key to delivering a transformation that can really be, I think, create a lot of value for shareholders, for employees, and ultimately create a fundamentally better, stronger, more powerful company.
Okay, awesome. So before we get into wrap up, any other sage advice, or are you ready to move into wrap up for today?
I'd say let's wrap it up, Rod. It's a pleasure talking with you. So
yeah, this has been awesome, and I've got to learn an awful lot that I hadn't really quite appreciated with the nuances that you were able to provide based on your experiences working with organizations. So I'm imagining there's folks out there like, I'd like to ask Edmund a couple of questions. How do people get in touch with you if they want to dialogue with you?
Well, I am pretty active on LinkedIn, so you can look up my LinkedIn profile. And Orchestro.com is our website. So visit our website, check out some of the material. We link to a lot of these resources. They're all free and available. So, you can check them out there. And then I would say, you can send us an email. All of our contact information for our whole team is on the website. So,
yeah, cool. Just a tiny plug for my company. We are a support partner for Orchestro with talent. So we actually can provide resources that can backfill some of those roles where you're trying to get over the hump with some of these activities. So I just wanted to point out that we've got a relationship with Orchestro that goes back a while now, and we're really happy about that too. So Edmund, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate all the sage advice.
Ron, thanks so much for having me. It has been an absolute pleasure chatting with you today.
All right, take care.
Thank you for joining MetaPod. For requests on topics or to ask questions, you can connect with Ron Crabtree 3 ways: via email at metapod@metaexperts.com, via LinkedIn, or by calling him directly at 734-425-1455, extension 103. Lastly, if you love the show, please consider leaving a 5-star review on your favorite podcast app. We truly appreciate all your support.